Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. I'm Tony Haggerty, Haggerty10, Twitter handle as you can see, and I'm joined today by Alison McConnell. We're here today to preview the St Mirren game and talk about winter shutdowns amongst other things. I'm feeling a bit under the weather, but we'll leave that to one side. Alison, St Mirren tonight, I'll ask you first and foremost, should that be going ahead?
My answer would be no. I think it's desperately unfair to expect teams to go out and compete when they're handicapped so considerably. I have a lot of sympathy for the predicament, as I do any team that finds themselves in that situation. I think the common sense thing to do is to say, let's try and arrange it at another date when it's it makes the game much more competitive, and I think it makes it far fairer. I hate to bring in the term sporting integrity, but I have to say I think it's very unfair to ask teams to play and compete when they're so weakened by COVID numbers. This isn't a new phenomenon now. This is the third season that we're looking at that will have COVID interruptions, and I know the fixture calendar is busy, but I think there has to be room to accommodate other dates because this has always been an inevitability at some point, I think. Furthermore, I think too, if you have the risk of players within St Mirren's camp possibly posting positive tests in the next coming days, there is nothing to say then that if you've played with them and played against them on a field that you're maybe not going to be coming into contact either. So I think at a time when we're looking at restrictions coming into force to limit numbers, I don't think it makes a great deal of sense to play it. And I feel for St Mirren as a club being told to go out and get on with it, essentially.
I have every sympathy for St Mirren. I've got my own COVID issues, which I'll find out later today about them. But in a Kyogo Furuhashi style, I turned up today to help my teammates, Alison.
Much appreciated.
All good, yes, indeed. Now, I'll say another two words to you, which seem to kind of get people running around with their hair on fire. Winter shutdown. What do we do, Alison? What do we do? What's the logical explanation? You are the voice of reason, Alison. Let us know your thoughts.
Well, again, I'm going to just offer a common sense solution. I think it does make sense to bring the break forward. I think the first thing is I think what we experienced last season of playing behind closed doors or playing in front of maybe 500 fans in a big cavernous stadium, I think is not a good experience. I think it completely takes something away from the game. I think it loses attention. I think it loses an edge. I don't think anybody wants it. I know that there are broadcasting issues to consider here, but again, what I would say is in terms of a spectacle for Sky, if they're wanting to showcase the Celtic Rangers game in January the 2nd, I think when you see that in what would essentially be an empty stadium, we hear the echoes of shouts and players' chats. It's not the same as what you get when it's a full stadium, when you have the noise and the colour and everything that goes with that spectacle. So for me, it's a no-brainer. I think it would be sensible to play tonight's games or to even to get to Boxing Day and to play the games and then bring the break forward. I think for teams who are also struggling, I'm thinking Dundee United, St Mirren, who have had COVID issues, I think it would offer them a bit of respite too, because the inevitability here is that there are other teams who are going to suffer similarly. And I think it reduces the credibility of the league and of encounters when you're asking teams to play when they're so seriously hindered. So for me, bring the break forward. I think it's very much the sensible solution, and then hope that when we get to mid-January, the end of January, we're in a position to bring people back in to grounds again.
Tim on comes in. Morning, guys. Sure, the winter shutdown should commence immediately. You've just heard the words of Alison McConnell. She says yes as well. And John Curry.
I think the oddness for me, Tony, was that you put a date on this, 26th of December, 500 people as of then, but there could be big crowds tonight. You've got games this evening. I don't understand the logic there at all. I don't understand what the difference a few days makes. I think it's inconsistent. I think that's what frustrates people at times, is not being able to follow the logic of decisions like that. And essentially what you're doing this evening is leaving it to people to decide themselves. Does it make sense to go to Easter Road or to go along to other grounds where you're going to be packed in with other people and potentially spread it? That seems to be a decision that you have to now make yourself, whereas from the 26th, that's a decision that's going to be made for you. And I do think it's hard to follow that kind of logic. I think the restrictions either come into place immediately, or you bring the break forward and have it right away.
Inconsistency in decisions from those in charge, Alison. You talk about the government, or are you talking about something else entirely that Celtic fans have been complaining about this season?
No, I generally think that I actually have a lot of sympathy for people who are making the decisions, because I don't think they are easy decisions. They're certainly not popular decisions. So I think I do have sympathy for anyone in that situation, government or otherwise. But what I would say is some of it does seem inconsistent. Like, you could have a full house tonight in certain grounds, but in 4 days' time, it'll be down to 500 people. I think that's a hard thing to weigh up in your own head.
Yeah, John Curry say that point makes no sense. Allow a big crowd this evening and then drop to the arbitrary maximum of 500. I think a lot of people find it hard to get that round their head around that, Alison, as you say. And Daniel Mack says, my problem with sporting integrity argument is what happened to it so far this season when teams have been depleted by COVID. Yep, I totally agree with that as well. And then Martin Davies says they could have played the Glasgow Derby then had the winter break. I saw a few fans mooting that yesterday as well. Alison, what's your thoughts about that? Bring the derby forward?
I'm not sure if that would be a possibility now. If they would let it leapfrog other fixtures, I don't think that would be a consideration, to be honest.
Ewan Boy Martin comes in and says Dundee United had to play with lots of players out. The show must go on. Well, I mean, there's just kind of all sorts of conflicting arguments here about it. But then David Bradley says, morning, David, regular contributors, play games tonight, then shut down. That seems to be the consensus, doesn't it? About playing the games tonight and then shutting down. And that would seem to be the logical solution. That's the one I think that last night 10 clubs had kind of agreed. And Ross County Rangers were the ones
two exceptions, yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds over the next few days. But like, I think when we first had these issues way back in March 2020, I think you need leadership now. You need very clear leadership, and you need people to be making sensible decisions. And there are lots of considerations here. First and foremost, there is the health and well-being of players, of fans, of the population at large. And secondary, and a close second to that too, is the financial implications that come when fans are shut out, and what that means to clubs, especially when you start to drop down a bit in terms of the revenue that hospitality brings in and everything else. And I think I get the argument that so much comes from supporters getting to games rather than being in an outside arena, but the travelling to games, getting on buses, getting on trains, being congregated in small, tight, airless places. I think these are unenviable decisions for people to make, because you know how unpopular they are going to be. But I think for me, to try and preserve as much as possible in terms of the finances and the league itself, I think it does make sense to introduce a break as quickly and as swiftly as possible, and then factor in where we pick up games deeper into the season. And that may mean a very frantic few months. What you may have is a month very much like December, where teams are maybe having to play 3 games in a week. You're maybe talking about a month or so of 8-9 games crammed in. It's not ideal, and I think you've seen that over the last few weeks, teams picking up injuries and not playing particularly well. But I think it's probably at the minute the lesser of two evils.
And amongst all this, Alison, there is a game of football to be played tonight. And we believe so. And Celtic, it's not Celtic's fault that it might be a depleted St Mirren side, but the need for points for Celtic is great, so they just have to play whatever St Mirren team is put out there and hope they can be successful and gain another 3 points.
from Celtic's point of view, if there's a fixture going ahead, they turn up, they play. There's a 7-point gap between them and Rangers at the top of the table. I think this game is probably as important as what Sunday's game was. I don't think they can afford to drop any more points, particularly when you're looking now at the break coming forward. Yeah. So I think it magnifies the importance of what was already a fairly vital fixture, just given the gap that exists now, because obviously Celtic didn't play at the weekend, or they played the Premier Sports Cup final, while Rangers had an opportunity to go further ahead. So I think if the game goes ahead tonight, and I think maybe the only thing that might jeopardise that is if St Mirren come back with further positive tests. I'm not sure how that would then play out. But as of now, as we speak, just after 10 o'clock this morning, it looks as though the game will be played. And from Celtic's point of view, it's no hangovers from the weekend. It's simply getting in and getting out with 3 points and ensuring that the gap is as minimal as it needs to be.
It's a kind of business as usual for Celtic in that kind of sense, isn't it, Alison? And you'll just want a result regardless of outside influences or external influences.
Yeah, I think it has to be. And I think we've spoken about this really over the last few weeks, that when a gap exists, that it as it does at the minute, then every game comes with an additional layer of pressure. You saw it actually last week at Dingwall. You saw the relief at that goal going in the 97th minute, because the consequences of it not going in are huge for Celtic. So it frames every game in terms of must win. There's just no scope for dropping points.
And Tim Anon comes in there and says, we've been depleted as well for weeks, as in Celtic. So that's fair enough comment, Tim. Yes, I agree with that, but maybe not as bad as St Mirren.
Yeah, it's slightly different too, and it's injuries, it's muscular injuries that are being picked up rather than COVID issues, which prevents other players within your squad training. It makes life difficult for everyone round about you when you have positive tests, because essentially it means that everything has to shut down and close, rather than players coming in and seeing the physio for treatment and stuff. So I think it's a real handicap when you have so many positive COVID cases coming back. I think it's incredibly disruptive to squad preparations and the squad itself. And I take the point, I mean, Celtic have been hindered hugely. In fact, I don't think Ange Postecoglou's had a full quota of players since he first arrived. I think it's been a headache. That's a whole other story, because I think when you're sustaining so many hamstring injuries, I think you have to be looking at what the reasons are behind it, and maybe thinking about tweaking things accordingly, because you can't really afford to keep having these recurring problems and the same problem.
We're going to cut it short today, obviously, because I'm feeling under the weather. We'll leave it at that. But I, like you, Alison, I think there could be a decision made today on the St Mirren game, and I'd be very surprised to see it go ahead. But at the moment, as we stand, as you said, it's 10:15 in the morning. It's all systems go for St Mirren versus Celtic in Paisley tonight. If you're going along, enjoy it. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks for your contribution, guys. As I say, we always try and read as many as we can out. Alison, thank you for your contribution as well. Enjoyed that.
Yep.